Nutrition. Boy, it's a simple word, but one of the most important words in bodybuilding. Without an understanding of nutrition, you'll never be able to control your weight, your shape of your muscles, and how you look. So pay careful attention to what the bodybuilders tell you. Listen carefully to what the champions tell you, because without that knowledge, you'll never look your best.
Probably the most distinctive thing about the in-shape competitive bodybuilding physique, even more than the incredible amount of well-developed, shapely, and proportional muscle, is the extreme definition that bodybuilding stars are able to achieve. When a contest-ready bodybuilder poses, he or she ends up looking like an anatomy chart. Every muscle in the body clearly defined. You see striations in places you didn't even know people had muscles. If you're not used to seeing physiques in this kind of shape, the result can be pretty shocking. When you hear people talking about how unnatural bodybuilders look, or women looking pained and exclaiming, "How gross," you can bet they aren't reacting to the big muscles. It's all that ripped to shreds definition. However, most people don't realize that this isn't a normal condition for most bodybuilders. They don't look like this most of the time. Instead, this in-shape condition is something that's very difficult to achieve, a result of intense training and the most rigorous program of dieting imaginable, aimed at creating a physique that combines the maximum amount of muscle mass and the minimum amount of body fat at the same time. To achieve this, bodybuilders have had to learn more about dieting for fat loss than almost anyone else in the world. In fact, bodybuilders are the most successful dieters on the face of the planet. Most diets don't work for most people, but bodybuilders are virtually 100% successful in their diets, judged by any normal standard. They're not only able to lose the amount of fat they need to lose, but they do this on a very strict and predictable timetable, so that they end up totally ripped and in incredibly defined condition just in time for the contest. If anyone has any further doubts that bodybuilders know something about dieting that other people don't, just look at what's been happening in the sport of bodybuilding for women. Most women struggle to get down below 30% relative body fat, but women physique competitors regularly achieve such extreme states of lean muscularity that it's clear we're going to have to re-examine our assumptions about the physical potential of the human female. Women, it now seems, are capable of getting a lot stronger, leaner, and more muscular than we've ever given them credit for.
Your training, you can learn how to do in a few years, no problem, figure that out. But the diet, you know, everyone's an individual and has a different body and will respond differently to different foods. So it's really important that you spend time with your diet and taking notes on everything.
It doesn't take a special diet to gain muscle. Just train hard and eat right. The trick is gaining muscle and losing body fat at the same time.
Of course, when you say the word diet, everyone automatically assumes you're talking about dieting to lose fat. But diet should really include all aspects of how and what you eat, for all sorts of purposes. Eating for energy to help you exercise, to help you build muscle, and for those individuals who feel they are too skinny rather than too fat, to gain shapely, proportionate, lean body mass. For example, bodybuilders don't only have to lower their body fat, they have to build the kind of quality muscle that results in a competitive physique. And they have to maintain as much of that muscle as possible, even while dieting for fat loss. This means paying a lot of attention to nutrition, what they eat, rather than just how much they eat. So a complete program of bodybuilding diet has to take all of these different factors into consideration in order to be successful. Okay, given that bodybuilders are the masters of dieting to control body composition, exactly how do they go about it? What kind of a program is it that bodybuilders have discovered that gives them such incredible results? First of all, bodybuilders have a very simple and practical way of dealing with food. The human metabolism is very complex, and the body utilizes nutrients in a wide variety of highly complicated ways. But bodybuilders aren't interested in all of this. They have certain goals they want to achieve. They want to know how to achieve them. They don't want to earn degrees in nutrition. They just want results. With this in mind, bodybuilders have gotten great results treating food in the following oversimplified but very practical way. Protein provides the raw material for muscle building. Fat has too much concentrated food energy and needs to be minimized. Carbohydrate is fuel.
I always keep the fat intake extremely low, probably below 5% coming into a competition. In the off season, sometimes as high as 10%. And then about 60% carbohydrate year round and the balance in protein.
I'd say my protein percent in the off season, say 10% fat, proteins around 40, and then 30 would be my carbs.
You have to always think that way. What can that food do for me? Protein gives me muscle, and carbohydrates gives me energy. Pasta gives you energy, it's good for training.
A typical bodybuilder's diet is a diet consisting of high protein, low fat. You know, they're looking for actually no fat and high protein. With, you know, it's a lot of egg whites, it's a lot of chicken breast, very lean steak occasionally. Some guys don't have it. Some good fish, you know, generally some white flesh fish such as fillet of sole or orange roughy is they choose to be one of their favorite fishes. And they're looking, you know, for vegetables for their vitamins, but, you know, everything's steamed or cooked with absolutely no butter or no oil.
The idea that protein is important to building muscle is hardly a new one, although you'd be surprised how long it's taken science and research medicine to verify this fact. Of course, protein has any number of uses in the body besides building muscle, but trial and error experience over the past 5 decades has taught bodybuilders that you need a lot of extra protein when you do intense training, or you won't get maximum results. Actually, it isn't just bodybuilders and other athletes for whom strength and muscle mass are important who need this extra protein. Nowadays, it's been shown that almost all kinds of intense physical effort increase the body's requirement for protein. So you're just as likely to see a marathon runner or a tennis player taking a protein supplement as a bodybuilder.
So how much protein do you need? Individual requirements may vary, but here's a rule of thumb.
You need 1 gram of protein for each pound of body weight on those days in which you are doing heavy workouts. And you need 1 gram of protein for every kilogram, that's 2.2 pounds of body weight, on days when you aren't exercising or aren't exercising intensely. There you go.
Thanks, Matt. This need for protein, by the way, has nothing to do with whether or not you're trying to lose body fat. In the process of losing body fat, you're going to lose muscle tissue. So you should always keep your protein intake high to help rebuild the intracellular muscle cells within the body.
The key with you or with anybody to grow and get big and stay there is to continuously have protein in the body. In other words, you cannot eat too much protein at one time and go too many hours with nothing. The protein takes 2 to 4 hours to digest. Then it's stored in the muscles as glycogen. If you now don't eat for 8 hours, that's 4 hours bringing the glycogen into the muscle, and the next 4 hours taking it away. So the muscle is not stable. So if you eat again, then you prevent the depletion.
Typical proteins that bodybuilders eat are egg whites, steak, chicken breast, fish, cooked without any fat or oil.
The body can only utilize 50 to 70 grams of protein per time, and no more. That means if you eat one steak that's 50, 60 grams of protein, is better than eating 2 steaks, which is 120 grams. Because the body will take the extra protein and store it as fat.
Fats, or oils, which are basically fats that are liquid at room temperature, are the most calorically dense of the 3 basic macronutrients. Protein and carbohydrate contain 4 calories per gram, while fat has 9 calories per gram. Quite a difference. The human body needs some intake of fat in the diet in order to survive and prosper, but most of us get far more than we need. Since bodybuilders try to get as lean as possible for contests, they've learned to avoid eating fat as much as possible. No fried foods, no dressing on their salads, no butter or sour cream on their baked potatoes.
Even when you're not on a weight loss diet, it makes sense to keep your fat intake as low as you're practically able. So bodybuilders have learned to restrict their fat intake all year long, not just when dieting for contests.
When it comes to nutrition, I think it's important to have the right amount of carbohydrates in your diet, also to have the right amount of protein, because you need your protein to recuperate and build new muscle tissues, which is very important. And you should keep your fat very low because you don't want to have too much calories in your diet.
The most fat is always found in the meat. Remember, meat is 60% fat.
Wow.
Even when it's lean. In comparison to, let's say, fish, which is only 6% fat and 94% protein.
Wow.
That's why when you hear people saying, what kind of fish I should eat, what fish is lean, don't worry about it. The most fattening fish might have 0.5% more fat than the other fish.
The third food element is carbohydrate. Carbohydrates in its simplest form is sugar. It comes in complex forms such as starches found in potatoes or rice, or in simple forms such as fructose that gives fruit its sweet taste. Again, the body has many uses for carbohydrate, and carbohydrate foods contain all sorts of different nutritional elements. But as far as bodybuilders are concerned, carbs are just energy. We've discussed the fact that your protein intake is fairly well fixed all the time, depending on whether or not you're working out, not whether you're dieting for weight loss. And you should be eating low fat as much as possible. So it stands to reason that if you want to reduce your caloric intake in order to lose body fat, your only recourse is to eat less carbohydrate.
I prefer the complex carbohydrates for bodybuilders, the long-lasting, the long-acting, rather than the simple sugar-type carbohydrates like simple fruits and so on.
If you have fruit, you can eat it right before the training because that is a quick carbohydrate. If you want to train for more hours, then you need carbohydrate that came from like pasta. That's a long-term carbohydrate. You can classify them in 2 types for us, for bodybuilding.
Carbohydrates are whole wheat flour. They like pasta, rice, potatoes.
Diets based on very low carbohydrate intake have been popular in this country for more than 100 years. In fact, when I first got involved in bodybuilding back in the 1970s, that was the fashionable diet. The zero-carb diet was what everybody was on at the time. Now, why do people like this diet? Well, it works this way. When you eat carbohydrate, it becomes stored in the muscles as glycogen. And along with the glycogen, you also store water. Well, glycogen and water have a certain amount of weight to them, so this contributes to the body's overall weight. When you deprive the body of carbohydrate, you lose this glycogen, and you lose the water associated with it. So in the first few days of a carbohydrate deprivation diet, you lose a substantial amount of body weight. Your limbs get smaller. You seem to look more slender. As a matter of fact, one of the byproducts of this diet is also that you tend to lose your appetite, so it makes it somewhat easier to stay on the diet. But of course, you haven't lost any fat at all. You're simply dehydrated. However, there's another mechanism that comes into play when you deprive yourself too much of carbohydrates. You go into a state called ketosis. The state of ketosis is not only not very good for you, but it really doesn't help you to lose weight at all.
The human body needs a minimum of about 60 grams of carbohydrate every day. When glycogen is not available, the body has to go to an alternate emergency system in order to keep the brain and nervous system functioning. Fortunately, there is an alternate fuel source available, and that energy is produced when the body is in the state of ketosis. The body needs carbs in order to adequately burn fat. Without those carbs available, fat is incompletely burned, creating ketone bodies as a result. And the body begins more and more to metabolize amino acids, protein, in order to obtain energy. It does not, as is commonly assumed, speed up the metabolism of fat. Without sufficient carbs available, it simply isn't capable of doing this. Your appetite does tend to diminish when you're in a state of ketosis, but that's about the only real benefit. Since you can't burn fat efficiently without enough carbohydrate in your diet, this approach doesn't make for a very effective fat loss diet. And you begin to burn up your own lean body tissue at an increasing rate, which not only means you're cannibalizing your own muscles, but other protein structures as well. Heart muscle, to use one scary example.
You also end up with severely reduced energy for your workouts. The body will function on ketone bodies, but it doesn't function nearly as well as it does when it has carbohydrate energy available. Not only that, but your entire nervous system tends to shut down. You get irritable, you experience sleeplessness. In fact, you can get downright stupid. Your mind just doesn't work very well when all it has to fuel it is ketone bodies. So it's obvious that the ketosis diet is not a good one. You lose water and not fat. And then you put yourself in a situation in which it's easy for you to lose muscle, but difficult for you to lose fat. That's not a good idea for anyone. But for a bodybuilder who's trying to build maximum amount of muscle mass, it's simply a disaster.
However, as we've seen, the only way to lose fat while maintaining maximum muscle mass is by reducing your intake of carbohydrate. Therefore, it follows that knowing exactly how low you can go in dropping your carbs as part of a fat reduction diet is a very important element to achieving your goals. So how do you know how far you can go without going into carbohydrate deprivation? Actually, this is easy. There's a test that will tell you, and anyone can do it at home. You can buy a product called Keto Sticks in almost any drugstore. These are test strips that you dip in your urine and which turn from pink to deep purple when ketone bodies are detected. Ketosis dieters use these test sticks to make sure they're in ketosis. But with the Weider system diet, you should use these test strips to make sure you aren't in ketosis. And if you aren't in ketosis, you haven't overly restricted your carbohydrate intake. The rule is this: you can cut back on your carbohydrate as far as you want, as long as you don't go into ketosis. If you do go into ketosis, even just a little bit, you have to immediately increase your carbohydrate intake in order to give your body the carbs it needs to supply energy for exercise and to allow you to burn fat efficiently. Ketosis is the bottom line. You can't restrict your diet any further than this and expect to burn fat well and protect your lean body mass, which are two major goals of the bodybuilding diet. If this isn't enough, if you need to lose weight faster than this diet will allow you to, further restriction of your diet isn't the answer. You have to attack the problem from the other end by burning up more calories through exercise.
Carbohydrate deprivation is a mistake. Without carbohydrates, you have no energy for training. Carbohydrates are also muscle sparing, and without carbohydrates, you won't burn fat properly.
The biggest problem is when you train and when you're preparing for competition to train and everything, if you don't eat carbohydrate and you go really on low carbohydrate, the body tries to make protein, converting it into energy, and it's something that's very hard to do. protein doesn't give energy. The body has to convert it, or you eat protein. If it doesn't, you go there to the gym and you have no energy. And that is how slowly the body is incapable of making energy from protein. And that's how people go in ketosis, and the energy goes down to zero, and finally like getting dizzy and collapsing.
I myself experienced that training for the 1991 Mr. Olympia. It was my first Olympia, and I wanted to try to look as good as possible, and I cut my carbohydrates down too low. And on 2 occasions I passed out just from not having enough carbohydrates just to power my legs. You know, my body just shut down. And I was off for 5 or 6 seconds both times. And through experience, I know never to go that low again. So with carbohydrates, you want to experiment and gradually come down. And if you ever feel yourself getting to a point where you're dizzy, you break out into a very cold sweat, you're seeing blurred vision, then you know you're going too low. You know, then you're depriving the body of too many carbs. Up your carbohydrates a little bit and just stay safe.
Most diets involve restricting food intake to reduce body weight. But to be really effective, especially for a bodybuilder, a diet needs to be protein sparing. That is, it should allow you to lose body fat while retaining as much lean body mass, muscle, as possible. Because when you lose muscle, you also lose the ability to burn calories effectively.
Most people know that calories are associated with exercise, that when you exercise, you burn up calories. What they don't realize is that the only thing in the body that actually burns up calories is muscle tissue. Muscle is the only thing that burns calories. Fat doesn't burn calories, bone doesn't burn calories. So it stands to reason that all other things being equal, the more muscle mass you have, the more calories you're going to burn up. Well, you see this with some of the larger bodybuilders. Some of the guys are like 250 pounds in contest shape, and they have enormous amounts of muscle mass. So for them, a diet is perhaps 4,000 or 5,000 calories a day. And they may eat as much as 7,000, 8,000, 9,000 calories a day when they're not dieting in order to maintain their muscle mass. Well, this is very, very unusual. Most bodybuilders, of course, are not that big. Most are 200 pounds or 210 pounds. And these people need to diet on much smaller amounts of calories because the muscle mass that they have simply doesn't burn up any more calories than this during the day. When you get the smaller bodybuilders, the amateurs, when you get some of the women who may only be 150, 140 pounds, this can really be a problem because a diet for them may be as little as 1,200, 1,400, 1,500 calories a day. It's very difficult to get all the protein you need and to get all the nutrients you need in your diet and eat that little every day. So their job is then to try and work out a diet that allows them to eat as little as possible and yet still maintain their muscle mass and maintain their nutrition. But basically, the bigger the muscles that you're able to create when you're training, and this goes for anybody, not just a bodybuilder, the more calories you're going to burn up, and therefore the more you're going to be able to eat without getting fat. And of course, that's a big advantage in that the more you can eat when you're training, the better you're going to feel, the more energy you're going to have, and the less difficult you're going to find dieting to be.
When I'm dieting for a contest, I have about 25 chicken breasts a day. Okay. 25, 27 chicken breasts a day. I come from an Italian family, big eaters. Yeah. I've always had big meals, so it's not like I force the food down. I just enjoy eating, you know?
See, you can get the same results if you will mix more proteins together. For example, meat, chicken, is digested 68% in the body only. That means that 32 is wasted. So out of the 25 chicken breasts, the masses are gaining only 15, 17. You see, if you will eat more fish is digested 78%. You see, is a higher quality protein. The best is eggs. Eggs is digested 88%. Only 12% is wasted. So when you eat 10 eggs, you're getting 9 in the muscles. when you eat 10 breast chickens, or chicken breast, whatever you call them, then you're only getting 6 in the muscle. That's the difference.
Wow.
You need to mix more different proteins like fish, then meat, then eggs, and then the meat difference. You have chicken, beef, veal, lamb, mix it.
You do need protein to build muscle, but not all foods are equal when it comes to providing that protein. Some, as you've just learned, provide a higher or lower net protein utilization than others. That is, your body can actually use a greater or lesser percentage of the amino acids in that food. Also, many protein foods have very small amounts of certain essential amino acids. And without the right amounts of all the essential aminos, you won't get the complete protein your muscles need.
Another factor which has a lot of influence on how many calories you burn is metabolic rate. Now, we all are born with a certain genetic predisposition to metabolic rate, which is simply just a measure of how many calories you burn up over a period of time. Everyone has a natural basal metabolic rate. Some people have much faster, some people much slower basal metabolic rate. For example, we've all met people who could eat and eat and eat and never gain a pound, while somebody else just has to look at food and they'll get fat. Well, these are examples of somebody with a very fast metabolic rate and someone with a very slow metabolic rate. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. And for us, what we need to do is try and increase our metabolic rate if we want to stay very, very lean while eating enough to build our bodies and to stay fit and strong. So there are 2 ways, basic ways, that you can speed up your metabolic rate. One is by exercise. When you work out, your resting metabolic rate goes up. That is the measure of how many calories you're burning at any given time. So you speed up your resting metabolic rate by exercise. Bodybuilding, of course, does speed it up somewhat, but bodybuilders like to do a lot of additional aerobic exercise, not because they burn up so many calories while they're actually on the treadmill or on the stationary bicycle. They do burn up some. But then the whole rest of the day, because of this kind of exercise, their resting metabolic rate is going to be elevated. So over the course of 24 hours, over the course of the day, they're going to burn up a lot more calories.
Bodybuilding workouts do burn calories, but not as many as you might expect. Bodybuilding isn't about endurance. It's largely an anaerobic form of exercise. Anaerobic simply means without oxygen. Bodybuilding training involves short, intense bursts of activity where you quickly outrun the oxygen supply to your muscles. At that point, you go into oxygen debt, where you have to stop, rest, and let your circulatory system bring more oxygen to the muscles involved before you can continue with another intense series of muscle contractions. With long, slow endurance forms of exercise, however, the level of intensity is low enough that your body can continue to provide the oxygen necessary to support the creation of energy in the cells for long periods of time. This is very different from the sets and reps scheme used by bodybuilders in the gym to create their very distinctive kind of muscular physique. Aerobic or cardiovascular type exercise is an ideal way of burning up the maximum amount of calories and stimulating your overall metabolic rate. So today's bodybuilders have learned not to diet as hard as they used to, but to eat a little more and burn up any excess calories by means of some kind of aerobic exercise. Competitive bodybuilders can't afford to get up on stage nowadays looking as drawn, depleted, and emaciated as too many would-be champions have allowed themselves to be over the years. After all, what's the use of building a quality physique with years of hard, strict, and disciplined training only to diet away all your gains in an 8 or 10-week period preceding a contest? Starvation diets cause the body to metabolize muscle tissue. And when you lose muscle, you also lose the ability to burn calories, a particularly vicious circle for a serious bodybuilding competitor or for anyone trying to create a lean, muscular physique. Furthermore, nobody could be expected to train with maximum intensity while starving themselves. You need energy to train, energy to recover, and sufficient nutrients in your body to allow your tired muscles to fully recuperate and rebuild themselves between workouts. So there is a limit to how hard you can diet and still protect your hard-won muscle gains. Obviously, once you're dieting as hard as you can, if you want to create an even greater caloric deficit in your body, your only recourse is to turn to additional energy-consuming exercise, which means some kind of aerobic activity in addition to your bodybuilding workouts in the gym. When it comes to burning calories, most forms of aerobic exercise are about equal, whether riding a bicycle, running, or simply going for long walks. The ideal is to elevate your heart rate to a moderate degree and keep it there as long as possible. The ideal amount of additional cardiovascular exercise for a bodybuilder is something like 20 to 40 minutes per session, 1 or 2 sessions a day. So if developing a bodybuilding physique is your goal, remember this motto: to look like a bodybuilder, you have to train like a bodybuilder. With too much cardiovascular exercise, you'll end up with too much of the wrong kind of physical development.
The other thing which influences your metabolic rate is eating food. When you eat food, your metabolic rate goes up. But it doesn't go up the same for every kind of food. For example, anytime you eat fat or you eat carbohydrate, your resting metabolic rate goes up by about 10%, and this is fine. But when you eat protein, your metabolic rate goes up by a full 30%. This is why it's a very good idea to eat at least some protein food with every meal. And if you notice, any time at the end of a meal when you've eaten protein, you'll tend to get hot. When you eat meat, you'll tend to sweat afterwards. And that's a perfect example of the fact that your metabolic rate is elevated. And it's the natural adjustment your body makes to eating food. You eat food, your metabolic rate goes up. And if this is coupled with exercise, that means you can eat more, but your body is not going to turn those calories that you've consumed into body fat.
It may sound like a contradiction, but you have to eat to burn fat and stay lean. If you deprive your body of food, it reacts as it would during a famine. Its survival mechanisms are activated. When there's no food available, your body doesn't want to expend energy. It wants to conserve it. So your metabolic rate slows down dramatically, which makes intense training extremely difficult. To avoid this, bodybuilders need to follow some simple rules of eating. 1. Reduce your calories, but don't starve yourself. Observe the nutritional minimums described later in this tape. 2. Eat a lot of small meals. Once you've determined what your caloric intake for the day is going to be, divide that up into 5 or even 6 meals, spread out over the course of the day. 3. Eat protein with every meal. Again, figure out what your protein intake for the day is going to be, and then divide it up so that you ingest at least some protein with every one of your 5 or 6 meals. And 4, don't eat the same foods every day. Keep nutritional variety in your diet as much as possible.
When I'm training, I eat 6 times every day. Smaller meals, a protein with a carb, always, salads, oatmeal, egg whites, chicken breast, fish, those sorts of things. I do eat pasta and, other junky things once in a while, but that's normal.
5 or 6 meals a day, it's the best way to do it. I think consistency with that type of eating is important. It's like you wouldn't eat 5 meals in one meal. Like, for instance, for breakfast, you wouldn't, like I hear these people say, well, I only had 1 meal today, I did really good. I only had dinner. When in fact, when you do that, your metabolism actually slows down. You'll actually burn more calories and get your body into shape much more effectively by eating more calories throughout the day, because every time you eat a meal, your body has to secrete different enzymes to break down the fats, the carbohydrates, the proteins, and so on. Every time you do that, you're boosting your metabolism. Whereas if you go from, let's say, 10 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night, your metabolism has a tendency to slow down, and you actually don't even lose weight.
Bodybuilders will start off having oatmeal with egg whites whipped in, and then they'll have some fruit. Then later that afternoon, they'll have chicken breast and maybe whole wheat French toast, then a pancake. Then they'll have a pasta with vegetables. Then further, they'll have grilled seafood, and then fish or chicken.
One of the worst mistakes some bodybuilders make nowadays is overtraining. As they get close to a contest, many physique competitors begin training 5 or 6 days a week, twice a day, and often with 2 intense cardiovascular workouts added to their bodybuilding training. When you're on a schedule like this, it's very difficult to stay anabolic. That is, in a state in which the body continues to build and maintain dense, hard, lean body mass. Overtraining quickly leads to becoming catabolic, where your body metabolizes and cannibalizes your own muscle tissue. The same thing happens when you go into ketosis, or when you don't ingest enough quality protein to support your muscle building workouts. A lot of bodybuilders seem to swear by the philosophies of more is better. Nothing succeeds like excess, or too much is never enough. But developing a bodybuilding physique, whether you're planning on serious competition or just trying to get into the best shape possible, involves a combination of intense effort and judicious restraint. Train hard, eat well, get plenty of rest. A balanced and reasonable approach to getting the most out of your body.
Rest and recuperation are important elements of this equation, as are not overtraining and not dieting too strictly for too long. But along with diet, there's another element of eating that's very important: what you eat. In other words, nutrition.
A lot of people are surprised to find that bodybuilders are not as interested in nutrition, that is, in healthy eating, as you might expect. Primarily, we're concerned with effective eating. That is, by creating a diet that will allow us to build muscle mass and minimize body fat. What the usual bodybuilder diet tends to lack is variety. They tend to eat the same sorts of things day after day: chicken, egg whites, fish, plain baked potatoes and rice, and some vegetables and salads. And then they tend to make up for whatever nutritional deficiencies this type of diet involves by taking large amounts of nutritional supplements. However, a lot of bodybuilders nowadays are coming to realize that one way to increase the effectiveness of their diet is to think in terms of nutritional quality, in addition to simply paying attention to how much protein, carbohydrate, and fat they've included in their daily diet regimens. And how do you do this? Actually, it's not that complicated. You really don't need a nutritionist looking over your shoulder in order to improve the quality of your diet. You simply need to be aware of the certain basic principles involved in eating.
For example, use variety to increase nutritional quality. Different foods contain different nutrients in different amounts, so it doesn't make sense to eat the same diet every day. There are enough different sorts of green, yellow, and other vegetables that you can go days or weeks without eating the same vegetable twice. The same is true for fruit and starches, such as potatoes, sweet potatoes, brown rice, wild rice, and pasta. And eating a wide variety of different foods is not only nutritious, it avoids the boredom that frequently spells disaster when it comes to serious dieting. Eat the highest quality food you can find. All things being equal, fresh is better than frozen. Frozen superior to canned. Processing tends to diminish the nutritional quality of food. Some types of markets feature food that is fresher with fewer preservatives. In addition, those bodybuilders concerned with health as well as physique like to seek out stores that sell organically grown food, free from contamination by pesticides. Much of this, of course, is a matter of personal preference. It's up to you how seriously you wish to pursue the health aspects of eating, but you should at least be aware of what the choices are. And finally, don't destroy nutrition through preparation. In general, broiling meat or steaming vegetables preserves nutritional value better than frying or boiling. Frying tends to add fat, and when you boil food, much of the nutritional value is lost to the water. Microwaving is another good way to cook food without destroying nutrients. If you're into cooking and want to know more about how best to prepare food, there are shelves full of books on the subject in any good health food store. In the past few years, bodybuilders have come to realize how important it is to drink sufficient amounts of water on a daily basis. Water continuously moistens our lungs. It helps us to maintain our internal temperature. Water lubricates our joints. Muscles are about 75% water. Blood is close to 90% water. Without sufficient intake of water, you become dehydrated. Your body begins to retain water to protect itself, and much of this water is stored subcutaneously, which smooths out muscular definition dramatically. Retained water becomes contaminated because your kidneys can't filter out contaminants properly when you're dehydrated. The liver is then called upon to help process these waste products, which interferes with one of its main functions, breaking down body fat. So without sufficient water in your body, you're liable to end up waterlogged, bloated, and obese, which is disastrous for a bodybuilder working for maximum definition. This also leads to problems with sodium. When you're dehydrated, sodium can't be adequately flushed from the body, causing further water retention, and any additional sodium ingested in your diet simply aggravates the problem. For anyone involved in intense exercise, the need for water is at least 8 12-ounce glasses per day. Some bodybuilders drink even more than this, and water in solution doesn't count. You need pure water, not juice, soft drinks, coffee, tea, or some other substitute.
The reason why I, drink water quite a bit during my workouts, you sweat a lot, so you lose a lot of the nutrients and stuff like that just to pretty much replenish the body and keep the muscles full. So I usually go through like anywhere from a gallon and a half of water a day.
When the body knows that it's getting water, it's going to let it go. When you don't give it water, it's going to hold on to it.
I try to drink up to 3 gallons a day, so I spend a lot of time in the restroom. But water is a good pacifier when you're trying to suppress your appetite, and it's a very good cleanser to keep your skin clean. And also when you're training twice a day and laying in the sun in suntan beds, you're losing a lot of water, and the muscle needs water, and the system needs water to regulate the temperature throughout your system.
We've all heard a lot about nutritional supplements, but what exactly are nutritional supplements, and more importantly, what can they do for you in your program? Food scientists today have developed a vast array of nutritional supplements, ranging from anything from chewable vitamins to multi-mineral formulas, all the way to advanced formulas of amino acids, protein powders, carbohydrate drinks, and other nutrients. These nutrients play the part of key catalysts in the biochemical reactions that help your body produce energy. And athletes today are using these nutrients to help potentiate the total nutrient composition in their diet, and therefore help them meet the momentary nutritional needs of their body.
Bodybuilders today are using supplements to get 100% out of their workouts. In the past, they didn't train quite as hard as they do today. They didn't have the time. They didn't diet as strict. They didn't, have the time to do double split routines, supersets, trisets. In order to get 100% and to maintain assurance that they're getting 100% out of their workouts, they have to supplement. There's no assurance, even with a good diet, that you're going to get 100% of the vitamins and minerals you need for your body to function at a 100% peak efficiency. In order to do this, you have to supplement.
But you need to increase the vitamins purely because when you train, you lose them. You lose the minerals, you lose the vitamins faster. And because you're bodybuilding, you eat more protein. Protein, when you eat more protein, requires more minerals. Because protein loses, in proportion, minerals and vitamins, they go up together.
Vitamins are organic nutrients that act primarily in the body as coenzymes. That is, they assist enzymes in carrying out various metabolic functions. Vitamins fall into 2 basic categories: water-soluble and fat-soluble.
The first type of vitamin that we need to look at and understand are the water-soluble vitamins.
Water-soluble vitamins are just that. They're soluble in water. That means that they're flushed from the body on a 24-hour basis, and they're very poorly stored. In fact, most of them aren't stored very well at all, if at all. Two types of water-soluble vitamins we're most familiar with. The B family of vitamins, that's B1, B2, B3, B6, B12, and vitamin C. Well, what do these nutrients do? General rule of thumb, most of the B vitamins, or many of the B vitamins, are involved in nervous system function. Now that's important because when we train in the gym, we think of exercising our muscles and our tendons and our ligaments, but training intensely is an immensely neurologically taxing thing that we're putting on our body. It's taxing in the sense that we need optimum concentration. We need to have all our circuits firing for maximum fiber recruitment and have the most intense growth-producing workout that we can.
Always remember, bodybuilding is different than other people. Bodybuilders need more B6 than other people because B6 helps digest the food and transport it into the muscle.
Vitamin C we've heard a lot about, another water-soluble component. Vitamin C works as a basic ingredient or component of connective tissue. That's important because we're training under extreme, intense type conditions. You may have an injury or some soreness that can increase your utilization of vitamin C. It also works with the immune system function, specifically your white blood cells, and it also works as an antioxidant, which is important to break down potentially harmful or carcinogenic components that develop as natural byproducts in your body. So B vitamins and C vitamins, water-soluble, need to be taken in with your diet or your supplementation program on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, fat-soluble vitamins, vitamins A, D, E, and K, are different than water-soluble in the fact that they're stored in your body, in the liver and the fat cells of your body. With the water solubles, you don't really have to worry about them reaching toxic levels because they're expelled through your urine quite quickly. With fat solubles, you have to be careful because they are stored and they can reach toxic levels quite easily.
Vitamin A assists in the formation of healthy skin and hair, and it's necessary for the proper development of bones and muscle tissue. Vitamin E is an antioxidant and aids in the formation of red blood cells. Vitamin D helps with the absorption of calcium required for strong teeth and bones. Vitamin K helps to maintain normal bone metabolism. Minerals are inorganic nutrients that come in two forms. Macrominerals, which are needed in relatively large amounts, including calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, potassium, sulfur, sodium, and chloride. Trace, or microminerals, needed in only very small amounts include iron, zinc, selenium, manganese, molybdenum, copper, iodine, chromium, and fluorine.
You have to be careful to make sure you're getting enough minerals in your diet. Minerals will help regulate everything from muscle contraction, fluid balance. Say, for instance, sodium. If you're deficient in sodium, you'll have trouble contracting the muscle. You'll have problems with cramping from the muscle being depleted of some of its fluid. Calcium, magnesium, zinc all have to do with cramping of the muscle and fluid transfer of the muscle. You need minerals for proper nerve function. So it's very, very important to supplement your minerals along with your vitamins.
Protein powders offer you a cost-efficient, calorically efficient way to increase the total protein intake of your diet. And we know that protein, outside of water, is the most abundant element in our body. And it's important to have adequate protein to support muscle growth and tissue recuperation. Protein powders are convenient, they mix well, and they're usually very easy for the body to digest and absorb. They can act as a substitute in a meal, for instance. And they can have a complete protein, which is a combination of proteins and amino acids derived from foods, as well as having additional supplemental amino acids added to the formula. Protein powders, or amino acids, are the building blocks from which muscle tissue is constructed. Amino acid supplements are one step removed from protein powders in the sense that the amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins, are supplied in their elemental or simple form. The benefit of this is that an amino acid supplement could be used in conjunction with a protein meal, as could a protein powder, for instance. to increase the essential amino acid ratio of the entire meal and thereby increase absorption and utilization.
Remember, supplements are just that. They're supplements. They're no substitute for a good, balanced, nutritious diet.
Now that you know how the champions eat to maintain mass, size, and power, put it to work for you. In the next lesson, you're going to learn all about the Weider principles, the principles that revolutionized bodybuilding and brought it into the modern age. You will know exactly every single technique that Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, all the greats have used to develop their body.
To get the real fine cuts they have today, you have to go into a much stricter diet than we did.
I think that if the nutrition is not proper, you can train as hard as you want. Your training can be perfect, your recuperation can be perfect, but you'll go nowhere.
I think that nutrition is the most important thing about bodybuilding.
Bodybuilders have to stay on a diet all the time, throughout the year.
You might be able to build a big body without the right nutrition, but you never will be able to build a body like a champion bodybuilder without watching the nutrition.